Good evening. I'm Susan Craighead with the League of Women Voters of Naperville. Tonight, we'll be hearing from young women from Metea Valley High School and North Central College, speaking about gender equality and their own futures. The fight for equal rights in the United States has a rich history of advocacy and activism by both women and men who believe in constitutionally protected gender equality. The Equal Rights Amendment was first introduced by Alice Paul in 1923. In the early 1940s, both Republican and Democratic parties added support for the Equal Rights Amendment to their political platforms. The amendment reads, "Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." Currently, 38 states have ratified the amendment, but legislation to nullify the deadlines imposed on its passage have not yet made it through Congress. Even without the ERA, society and women's place in it have changed dramatically over the last 100 years and will continue to change. Tonight, let's hear what our youth has to say. We'll have time at the end for questions. Please use the chat function. Now, I'd like to introduce League member Gail Ryan, who will moderate tonight's panel discussion. Gail?
Thank you, Susan. I would like to welcome our panelists to tonight's forum and thank them for taking time to share their views on feminism with us. I'm going to briefly introduce each panelist, and then I'm going to ask them to tell us a little bit more about themselves before we start the actual panel discussion. So Libby Gardner is a sophomore at North Central College here in Naperville. She is pursuing a BA in social sciences and political science with a minor in Spanish. She's a College Scholars Honor Student, Vice President of Green Scene, and the North Central College Now Vice President. Katie Tyler is a junior at North Central College. She is a marketing major with a minor in political science and a concentration in ethical leadership. She is president and founder of North Central College's Now's Can. She's treasurer of Breakaway. She's a College Scholars Honor Student and Leadership Ethics and Values Fellow. Madeline Schatz is a senior at Metea Valley High School in Naperville, District 204. She's the president of Elevate, a female empowerment group at Metea Valley, and was elected to be the Speaker of the House in the high school's American Government Simulation this past semester. And our fourth panelist is Zoe Williams. She is also a senior at Metea Valley High School. She is the current Illinois Youth Supreme Court Justice for Youth Government and Metea Valley's Delegation Vice President. So again, welcome to our panelists. I'd like each of you just to take a moment to expand on your introductions, tell us a little bit more about yourselves. And Libby, why don't you start us off?
Hi there, I'm Libby Gardner. Thank you so much for having me here to talk. As you mentioned, I'm the Vice President of North Central Now, and I'm pursuing a major in political science and social sciences. My goal is to go to law school and do social justice law. So I'm very excited for that.
Great. And Katie?
Hello, my name's Katie Tyler. And yes, as she said before, I am a marketing major, political science minor, and I am the president of North Central's National Organization for Women, Campus Action Network. It's kind of a handful, but we just started basically last semester, and we are very excited to be a part of everything that League of Women Voters has invited us to be a part of. But yes, I'm a junior, and I will be a rising senior next year, also as the president and founder of the National Organization for Women here at North Central.
Great. And Madeline? I don't know if she's able to unmute.
Sorry.
Oh, there she is.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is so bad right now. I'm Madeline Schatz. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, as they mentioned before, I am the president and co-founder of my high school's women's empowerment club called Elevate. I've been a feminist since I learned what a feminist was, and I'm just really excited to be here. Yeah.
Great. And Zoe, you can wrap us up.
Hello, I'm Zoe. As you previously mentioned, I am the Chief Justice of Illinois Youth and Gov, which is a paid program that gives women lots of leadership opportunities. And as for feminism, my sisters have introduced me to this concept and activism journey. And over the past few years, I've looked into feminists such as Angela Davis, who looks at the feminists on global structure from capitalism to settler colonialism, and also Miriam Kaba, who looks into feminism within the prison industrial complex. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, welcome all, and thank you for telling us a little bit more about yourselves. We're going to talk a lot about the situation as it stands currently and looking ahead to the future, but I want to start and discuss, take just a brief look to the past. And so my first question for all of you is, what do you think is different about the issues facing young women today versus, say, the issues facing your mother's or your grandmother's generation? And what, if any, issues are the same? And now I'll just toss it open. Whoever wants to start, go ahead and unmute and share your thoughts.
I think that I think that some of the issues that are different, well, one like really big issue, like current issue, is women's health and like the right to abortions. I know that in like the 1970s, abortion was legalized in all 50 states, and now it's a lot harder to access. So that's just a really huge difference between like some past generations. And something that I've noticed that's really similar is the dress code issues, because like clothing styles have changed a lot. People have dressed differently, morals are different, but there's still the same issue of like dress code and targeting women with what they wear and just making assumptions based on that.
Okay.
And also to add on that, I think another huge thing is definitely women's labor force expectations. So in the most recent future, at least, it's more normalized for a lot of women to be active members of the workforce as compared to the past. But this is mostly in developed countries. And also women are continuing to take leadership roles as well. Now, although there's been significant progression over time, some issues that young women still face is intersectional bias. So people of color especially receive a lack of representation in leadership roles or even in general, and the right to receive an abortion, as mentioned before, and bodily autonomy in general. A lot of that has been progressing over time and most recently struck down. So that's something that we still really, really need to be fighting for today. And also basic human rights, especially in less developed countries, especially with all of the crises going on in Iran. That is a big subject that's up for debate and quite honestly shouldn't be, especially in terms of human rights. So those are things that, although we seem to be progressing mostly in more developed countries, we're definitely taking slower in some areas.
I would say equitable pay for women has been a fight that's been continued throughout from our grandmother's generation to now. Men still receiving higher pay and women of color still receiving pay less than white women. And I think that's going to be at the forefront of our generation. That's been such a prolonged justice journey for just equitable pay in general.
I think that's something that I've noticed that's kind of changed women's rights a little bit is social media. So things like the Me Too movement and platforms given to women have allowed them to stand up against sexual assault. But then that's a positive note. I've also noticed on a negative note that sometimes social media platforms can allow for misogynists like Andrew Tate to rise up and show people that it's okay to act like that. So I think that when used positively, it can be a good thing, but I think that we need to be really careful to make sure that it doesn't turn into the bad thing that it has the potential to be.
All right. Well, you've laid a lot of topics and interesting groundwork for for our next question. And that is, what issues concern you the most as you look to the future? And you may have touched on some of them, but is there, a standout for you in one area or another? Or maybe one where you want to focus your attention as you look ahead?
I definitely think for me personally, it would be reproductive rights, especially because of everything that's happened in the most recent months. That was a huge reason why we decided to do our march this past October with a bunch of Naperville allies in the community, just to make sure that we really fight for our right to choose, especially when it comes to voting in the midterm elections, which we did, and we were successful. So that was amazing. But we need to keep pushing harder. We need to keep showing people in legislative power that we are here and we need to have our rights taken care of.
Yeah, I think that going off of that, the biggest thing that I think we should be doing is listening to women. I think that we need to integrate more women authors, more women of color authors into education. We can start that as early as like preschool, elementary school. And even now, some of my college courses, we don't read any books by women. So I think that that really needs to change. I think that when we start listening to women, the world gets better and we're able to better work through those problems of sexism.
I would have to say my most pressing issue is probably addressing the misogynoir for Black women in the workplace and in the academic spaces, because they're awfully like disciplined at higher rates, or they're reprimanded more in the workplace. And I think it kind of shelters them out of either that in academia or in the corporate world. And I think there's going to be a long ladder to climb to disrupt misogynoir in these places.
I think the most pressing issue for me, as well as Katie, is like reproductive rights and women's rights to healthcare and stuff, because I know people are trying to take down places like Planned Parenthood, but they do so much more than abortions. They are healthcare. They're a safe place for women to get birth control and just so many other important things. And if we take away like that, it's taking away more than just abortion. It's taking away health.
All right. One topic we haven't touched on yet would be, how do you think childcare options in the U.S. are going to affect your career choices and work-family balance options, if at all? What are your thoughts?
I feel like due to the high rates of childcare, it's almost like if you have to choose, like, do I like have to take some time off my career and raise my children, or should I just pay those extremely high rates for my children to take care of? And it seems like that's option to have childcare is always reserved for women with high incomes or women in like who generational wealth or such as that, because low income families, it's just unrealistic for them to stay home and take care of the children all day, especially families who live check from check. So just entering, like trying to enter the corporate world again, or just the work field again after that gap in your resume, it just raises that barrier even higher. So I feel like the child care options are definitely anti-feminist, and just working towards universal child care would be a huge step for women.
Yeah, and I think that going off of that, I want to go to law school and be a lawyer. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to work twice as hard as my male counterparts just to be credible and relevant in my career. And I think that in doing that, it worries me if I ever want to have children, thinking about the time that I'll have to take off, the choices that I'll have to make, the criticisms that I'll face, putting children in childcare, things like that just kind of really freak me out. And I feel like we definitely, like Zoe was saying, need to work towards universal childcare so that that's more accessible for everybody.
Going off of what Libby was saying, my mom is a teacher, and she was a stay-at-home mom when me and my siblings were born, and she like could not get back into the workforce when she wanted to. And she has such a passion for teaching. And when we were old enough to not need a stay-at-home mom, she just could not get herself back in for a really long time. And I've wanted to be a therapist growing up, and just knowing how hard it would be to take off work as that profession, to take care of my children, and to try and be able to afford childcare, as we were talking about. It's just such a hard thing to balance. And it really makes me like reconsider those career paths that I really were interested in.
Yeah, and going off of what a lot of the other young women were saying, I mean, a lot of people feel like they have to choose. I know, like, as a young person myself, a huge thing that I've told myself, even since I was young, was that was something like I had to make sure I was financially comfortable and I had plenty of stable footing within my career before I was even able to start thinking about starting a family. And those are things that I was forced to think of because in our society, we normalize childcare not being widely accessible. And those are things that we could do both, essentially, if that was open to a lot of us. So I definitely think that women in less and underprivileged communities, they definitely struggle with this so much more, just because this isn't even remotely an option for them, and they just have to put their lives completely on hold. And I would love to live in a world where I could do both.
What gives you hope as you look toward the future? I know we've talked about, things that are of concern and, things you're focused on, but what are some things that give you hope as you look to the future?
For me, I think that it's things like this that give me hope. Gatherings of powerful, inspiring women talking about how to fix these things. The reproductive rights march that we did, just the energy that had all of the women, young and old, trying to make a change, and then the change that we made when Illinois put abortion on the ballot.
Yes, go.
So things like that give me hope. I'm taking a lot of gender studies classes at North Central. I have some amazing professors like Dr. Dolinko, and we're reading authors like Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde. Things like that really pump me up for the future. They make me feel like I can make a positive change. And then in addition to that, the revolution in Iran that's going on right now with the murder of Mahsa Amini and women's rights like that, that is giving me hope that we can have positive change for women.
For me, it's just the amount of young people who are interested in doing the work to become a feminist, are interested in current events. Ever since Trayvon Martin, I feel like young people have really immersed themselves in the world issues and going beyond feminism and looking at other sectors of activism. And also the community organizers who are on the groundwork leading those protests and just helping women, going to women's shelters. They give me a lot of hope too, because they're just dedicated to this movement, and not everyone has as much just the same dedication as they do. And I think it's just special to have community organizers, and even in this area, doing the work that needs to be done for women.
This is kind of going off what Zoe was saying. Seeing how open-minded and willing to fight this generation is just so like inspiring to see how just people are willing to listen, people are willing to reflect on their decisions, on their thoughts, on their morals, and they're willing to like
I don't know if others have, but I've lost Madeline's audio. Uh-oh. Let's see. You want to try that again, Madeline? See if I know you haven't.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
Really as I was saying, I'm not sure what was heard, but seeing how open-minded and willing to listen and reflect on morals and just choices and everything that this generation is and is inspiring other generations to become is super inspiring. It just really makes me feel like we have hope for change, because we have people willing to fight for that change and people willing to listen to that change.
Hi, sorry about that interruption, guys. But a big thing that really does inspire me is working with other women that I'm around and hearing from different perspectives, especially when we're going on marches, especially when we're going to seek out new opportunities to change our perspectives. I think that is such a huge moment of like realization for me, and especially listening to older women who have been fighting this fight for a very long time. I talked to a few people at a women's march in Chicago that have been doing this since they were 15 or 16. And it was absolutely crazy, especially with how different the climate is from then to now. And the fact that they're still going out on the streets and are still taking to fighting for reproductive justice and even women's rights in general. So it just really gives me the feeling to just want to go out and continue this fight, and want to continue that later into my profession and even my career in the future, and maybe inspire others to do the same as well. So I think just empowering other women and sharing our own personal stories, that is what really keeps this fight going.
So a number of you mentioned that, just the energy and the involvement of your generation and young people gives you hope as you look to the future. So what messages do you have for your peers, both male and female, regarding feminism today? And kind of what message do you want to send out there to encourage them and keep them motivated?
I think honestly, by taking leadership roles in places where you don't feel like you're confident, I think that's what honestly takes the biggest step. Just because like, I know for me in general with my club, like I was convinced by Laura Welch at a women's rights rally in Naperville. And I never thought that this situation could even be possible, especially at my small little school. So the fact that I took a leap and decided to include myself in a situation where I didn't feel so strong and just took the leap of faith and did it anyway, women continue to surround me with hope and continue to inspire me to keep pushing, even in places where I really don't feel like, it's even my choice to join, or even in the aspect of I don't feel confident, at least to make my voice heard. And I sometimes even don't even feel like my voice matters, but it's situations like this where I really do feel like my voice matters. And I hope to continue inspiring other women around me to take a leap of faith, even if you might not feel 100% confident. It's always worth it to include your chair, and you should continue fighting the good fight for all of us.
Yeah, I think that going off of what Katie said, my message to, especially to young women like me, is to make yourself a spot at the table. Even if you are looking around in leaders and you don't see anybody who looks like you, I would say you have to create that space for yourself, and you have to pave the way for others like you for later generations. I think a message for everyone I have is to listen to women, to read books by women and women of color, to practice intersectionality and to keep growing, and to realize that there's always more to learn and there are always more ways to grow.
A message I would have for my peers would probably be like, feminism is the work of trying to uplift women's voices and listen to their concerns, and learning how to support women. The first step is learning how to listen to women. And I think that's just the basis of the work that's being done. And once you learn how to listen, you'll just be able to propel in this movement. And I think that's will give us hope for the future.
I think, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I think like a big message that I would like to share is just to keep trying and not to give up and lose hope, because although we've lost some battles recently, like with reproductive rights, that doesn't mean we're at the end. That doesn't mean we have to give up. That doesn't mean we have to stop trying, because if we keep going, we can achieve our goals. We can keep fighting. We can get to where we need to be in terms of equality.
Okay. And so kind of building off of that, because that's going to take legislation and our representatives and senators to be involved. So how do you see the role of women in elected office?
I genuinely feel like that is the most important thing, especially for me in my life, I guess. Just seeing women on the world stage is so important just because it really speaks volumes when you see women in positions where, like, oh, if they are in a position of power and in a big position in leadership, I can do the same. And I have what it takes to rise to that level and help inspire others, to amplify others' voices, to show kindness to others, to include everyone in every marginalized group in the conversation. And I think that's one of the biggest parts. Like, as Libby was saying earlier, just like amplifying women's voices in general is so important. And when you do see them in those leadership roles, that is an opportunity where maybe some young women at home or even children can just be like, oh, hey, like that girl looks like me. I want to do that too. And I know that that was a huge thing for me growing up, especially seeing women on the news and even like seeing the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Like, she is so powerful with her words, and she is so strong in her activism and is really able to lead the country well. And she does it so amazingly, where a lot of other men in power can also look to her for guidance. And the fact that we're even seeing that in this time today is amazing. And I wish it happened sooner, but I hope that it continues in the future.
Yes, I agree with Katie that prime ministers and women leaders like Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand are very inspiring to me. I'm from Michigan. We have a woman governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and it's been very powerful for me to look up to her and say, oh, there is a woman in politics. She's a woman like me. I can be in politics. I think it's vital that we elect women for office everywhere. I know that Ruth Bader Ginsburg spoke about women being on every seat of the Supreme Court, and I fully agree with that. I think that we need women leaders everywhere. I think that it's our turn now.
Seeing women in the office makes me hopeful, because for so long these government institutions have been dominated by men. And I hope these women will, in their work, address the disparities we see, the gender disparities we see through legislation. And some of them are just great role models to me. But also, when I think about the role of women in government, I also look at the community organizers, and I almost hold them as the same level as elected women, because I think that the work they do, from this women organizer, I have a relationship on the South Side of Chicago, to the people in downtown Aurora providing safety and housing to women, I think they're just as important. While we always can't rely on elected office to address these disparities, I think it's amazing to continue to level the playing field and elect more women to office, so we can begin to see a change in legislation for women's rights.
I agree with what everyone's been saying. Seeing women in those positions of power gives me hope that we will be able to continue our fight, because people are listening to us. No one understands a women's issue as well as a woman would understand. And I really just think having women in those positions just gives me so much hope that we will be able to resolve these issues and keep fighting for equality.
All right. I know one of you mentioned the importance of listening and generations listening to one another. So building on that, what can local organizations like the League of Women Voters of Naperville do to support young women today? What recommendations would you have for us?
Continuing to have conversations like this, I think, will play a vital part in including young women in this work, but also just taking a step farther from including them in the conversation, providing a seat for them at the table with these women, I think would go a lot to increase young women's position in this organizing space. And also, while it's great to listen to women, I think it's even better for young women, I think it's even better for them to have their seat at organizations like this.
I think it's also great for organizations like League of Women Voters to include a lot of young women to have a seat at the table, just because I know, for me at least, like, I take a lot of guidance from a lot of the other women that I'm surrounded by, especially like regardless of age. So having that opportunity for mentorship and to open up to new perspectives and really hear into their lived experience, just because, I mean, they've been fighting this fight a lot longer than us, you know, like we entered at like chapter 1,000 just to see what was going on and everything. So like the fact that we're entering at this time in our lives, especially such a monumental time, especially with everything that's happened in the past year, I think it's really important to listen to people who have all lived it before and who have fought this fight, and what we can do to make sure that all the hard work that they've put into everything continues and it solidifies. Like, we are here to solidify all of the hard work that they've put in and continue it on to future generations. So I think that making sure that we have all of those voices to have a seat at the table is really important to continue this legacy.
Yes, I would agree with the mentorship. I know that when we hosted the reproductive rights protest, it was a huge learning experience for me. It was amazing to work with Naperville allies like the League of Women Voters and AAUW. I really learned a lot looking up to them, and I've been able to use a lot of those tactics in doing my own voter registration for my friends and other things like that. And so I think that things like panels like these are really great learning experiences. They kind of like pass the torch down, like Katie was saying, and they show us how to continue this fight.
I agree. And I think that continuing having conversations and events like this where people can talk and people can find that sense of community, and continuing to organize protests like the reproductive rights protest in October, I think they make all the difference. And they might seem small in like scale of the world and like the country, but one voice can carry such a long way, especially an inspirational voice and a voice that has this space where it can be elevated and where it can be spread and where it can just inspire others. It's more than just like a little thing. It's these little things add up.
All right. So what do you think is the role of men in feminism and in all generations of men? What role do they play?
I think that it's up to men to help us elevate our voices. I think that too often men have the microphone and they think that they can speak on women's rights. I think that it's up to men to take the microphone and to hand it to a woman.
I definitely agree. I think it's a man's role to listen and have women's direction guide them in what their role should be in feminism. Because sometimes when men get involved in feminism, I mean, it can become to be more centered around their role when, I mean, their place in feminism, where it's women's. This is women's activist movement surrounding women's rights, and men should be active in their allyship and be active in holding each other accountable. It's up to men to hold each other accountable in these spaces and listen to women and just influence their peers, their friends, their family, because men, they know the power of their voices, as they've been in positions of power for decades and decades, and they should know that their power of voice can carry a lot throughout this movement, and they should definitely utilize it to uplift us.
Yes. And I think especially like men can be feminists too, you know, like they have the power to help us flip the narrative. Like with that privilege, they are able to help shape the narrative in how women are seen in the media and the way that women are seen in leadership roles. And I think by including men in that conversation, it could be really important to flip that narrative, as I mentioned before, but also to include them in those conversations, because the issues that a lot of us face are not unique just to women and affect everyone as well. And also, men can have uteruses as well. So making sure that like men are included in this conversation, non-binary people, people of all genders can be included in this conversation because a lot of these issues affect them equally.
I think that there's so much misinformation and stigma around the feminism movement. I know that many or a lot of men think that it's to take women and bring them a level above men, where in reality, we just want to be equal to. We don't want anyone to be superior. We don't want anyone to have more power. We want everyone to be equal and everyone to be the same. And I think that if men take more time to listen and just understand that we're not trying to be better than them, we're not trying to take their positions away from them, then I think that could make all the difference.
All right. Now, turning inward to each of you, how do you think your activism and your interests are going to impact your future career choices? I think maybe some of you may have already thought that, but how do you see that playing out?
For me personally, like, I never thought that that would be possible. It wasn't until I got to college where I realized that a lot of the things that I'm very passionate about can go hand in hand with a career. I know the first thing I thought of when I thought of activism is politics, but it doesn't even have to be that. It could be working with non-for-profits. It could be working with other groups as well. Like, there are so many options for you to be passionate and show what you really care about and integrate that into your career. And all of these things are possible. Like, I know for me, at least, I've been on the internship search, and it's been a struggle to try to find ways that I can integrate marketing and also political science. But I was so mind blown how many opportunities that I'm able to do that by running a social media page, by doing all of those different things. So I think once you really open your mind to opportunities and outlets where you can show your activism, I think that's really important, especially when it comes to choosing what organization works for you. Especially, like, I know on my resume, I put a bunch of things that I work with League of Women Voters with, at least with the rally and everything, but like, them seeing that on my resume just shows like, hey, these are all the things that I really care about. And those aren't things that I'm putting on the back burner, you know? So if a place wants to hire me, they would have to see that, look, these are the things that I care about. And if you're not on the same playing field, then that's just not the right fit. So I think especially by integrating that into your resume, doing things that you really care about, those are the things that are going to be able to, in the future, merge your passions as well as your career.
Yeah, and I think that it's really interesting to see how social justice can be a part of every single career. So I want to be a social justice lawyer and fight for human rights, which is very much like, you think social justice, you think social justice lawyer. But my parents are teachers and librarians. And so my dad is an English professor, and it's interesting to see how he can put books by women and books by people of color in his curriculum and work on intersectionality in that way. It's interesting to see how my librarian mother can put out books of like lists of books by women and other things like that. Even like I took a class called Critical Whiteness last semester, and we talked a lot about environmental racism. And I think that it's interesting to see how the environment can be affected by things like racism and sexism. So yeah, I think it's just really interesting to see how that can be integrated into every single career pathway.
For me personally, my activism and politics have largely infected my morals, and they have taught me like not to be a compromiser. In some ways, like for example, I'm very interested in law from anything, and I would like to be anything from like a policymaker to a criminal defense lawyer. But just like coming from my political background and knowing like many different like law professions you can go into, I never even for a second, even though they make a lot of money, considered to be a prosecutor, because one, that just weighs on my moral compass, and two, there's so many other ways to help welcome people in need of legal action. And just also through policy work, like I'm also interested in studying public policy, and recently throughout these past few years, I've been learning just like how racist policies can be from anything, even from the workplace, from hair policies to like, especially how like race coded like dress codes can be, and like how I can possibly use my profession to reword those policies or to equitable policies. And activism has just played such a large role in my interest. And it makes me just want to go into a profession where I can help my community.
For me personally, I want to be a speech therapist. And I know it's really hard to incorporate feminism, but that's definitely something I think about a lot with my career. I never want to lose this side of me. I always want to empower other women, empower myself. And I think some ways I can pursue that are by helping create clubs and environments at the schools that I work at where women can come together, empower each other, talk about feminine issues.
Oop. There goes the Wi-Fi again. I think we got a good portion of Madeline's answer. We'll see if she bounces back. If not, I'll start with our because we're approaching the time for some Q&A. So actually, Madeline, it looks like your image is back. Do you want to finish what you were saying? Because you froze up there at the point.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's
not
okay.
sure where I left off, but I'm really interested in politics. And even if I can't be a politician or don't feel comfortable enough to try that, I can still help campaign and work for people that with important policies and still take a really big part in that in my future.
All right. Well, we've covered a number of different topics tonight, but before we turn things over back to Susan and Q&A, I just wanted to ask one more thing, and that is there anything else you want to share with our audience tonight that maybe we haven't touched on that you think is important to this conversation and important to your approach to feminism, or anything else that you just wanted to share tonight before we see what questions are there from the audience?
Something I learned over the years in my activism journey, actually from Miriam Kaba, a prison activist, there's this famous quote that she always says and regurgitates over and over again, is find the people who are already doing the work. I think within feminism and with this community, you don't need to reinvent the wheel because there's always someone that's going to be invested in this movement, and you just need to find them and learn how to collaborate. I think feminism is about coming together, and this needs to be a collaborative movement. This is a group effort working for women's rights, and that's just something that's always stuck with me. Just find the people who are already doing the work. I just really like that concept.
Any others have quotes or messages from folks that have inspired you that you use as kind of your North Star?
This is like about body positivity, which I think really does go hand in hand with the feminism movement. Something that I really just like live by is, I'm not sure who said this quote, but my arms give me the ability to hold things, to hug people. My face gives me the ability to smile and talk and speak my mind. My stomach gives me the ability to digest my food. My legs give me the ability to walk and run and move freely. And I just think like it's really important to appreciate ourselves and appreciate others, and that like body positivity and like feminism, they really do go hand in hand. And it's just important to always empower ourselves and empower others, and to never weigh anybody down, never judge anybody, never say harmful things, because they can really go a long way.
I think one for me is the no well-behaved person has ever made history. I'm not sure who made that quote, but I mean, previous generations have been so resilient when it comes to fighting for women's rights, and that has opened so many doors for so many of us. And that's not an excuse for us to stop there. We got to continue taking action, whether it may be in form of protest or even as small as reposting a link to donate to an organization that makes an impact. And you don't even have to donate to that organization. You could just repost the link and send it to someone else. But my point is that you can be involved in any way possible, and you have to make some friction in order to make some change.
I think that my North Star when thinking about this is women like you guys. I take a lot of inspiration from other feminist leaders. When I feel hopeless after I maybe read an article about like misogyny in the workplace, I think of panels like this. I think of the gender studies classes that I'm taking, and I think of all of the people in the world right now who are trying to make positive change, and that just really keeps me hopeful.
Well, I won't speak for the rest of our audience, but you four have been very inspirational to me this evening. I have been very impressed with your outlook, with your eloquence. And I am glad we found one another so that we could be here together and kind of share thoughts and build on one another and support one another. So thank you again for spending the evening with us like this and letting us hear from you. And again, it's just, I have been very inspired. So thank you for that. And I'm pretty sure we have questions from our audience members as well. So I will turn things back to Susan, who has been watching that.
Yeah, so we do have a couple of nice questions. Becky says, when I was your age, I thought, of course, ERA would be passed, the Equal Rights Amendment. You think the Equal Rights Amendment will be part of the U.S. Constitution in your lifetimes?
I'm sure I'll have a positive mindset, but I'm not sure. Recently, there's just been such a rollback of rights, which is scary because I feel like this is the first generation where we not gain rights, but we lost rights from reproductive to even voting. So, I mean, we can do the work to get it passed and advocate for it, but I would have to say maybe for that one.
I sure hope so. I mean, I know that a lot of us can speak to the fact that, I mean, we've seen it. We've seen documentaries, we've seen videos, we've seen it in our own streets, how important it is for many of us to get the ERA passed. And I just hope that the work that we continue to do will contribute to that happening in my lifetime. I just want to see it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I really hope so. I think that if we continue to elect women leaders, I think that when my generation, when all of you young women become, successful leaders, hopefully we can pass that. I really hope so. And I also really have faith that it might happen.
I think that right now we are definitely regressing, which is really, really hard. But I think that there is hope, and maybe not this year or next year, but I think that with this generation growing up and then taking in those leadership positions, we will eventually be able.
So we lost a little bit of what Madeline said. Did you want to finish, Madeline, or are you okay?
Sorry, guys. I'm not sure where it left off again, but I just think if we keep staying resilient, we keep fighting, that there really is a chance that we really can make things happen.
So do any of you think that we will see a woman president in your lifetime?
Yes, I think we're so close to it happening. I have my fingers crossed for the next presidential election. I think that all of us together, hopefully we can do it.
Yes, I am hopeful for a woman president. Hopefully a president that will represent my best interests at heart and who recognizes disparities and will work to get them done. Hopefully a woman that aligns with what I align with, and not just a woman president, but a woman that's president for women, if that makes sense.
So we have a comment. Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
Madeline.
I was going to say, I think that we've already been so close. It's definitely, I really do think it's going to happen.
So in the 1970s, women had blatant laws and social mores that treated women as unequal. It wasn't subtle. Since then, laws and social mores and opportunities have changed to make the playing field more equal, but obviously more work still needs to be done. So what grade were you in when you recognized the need to put forth efforts to continue elevating women? What event or issues made you aware that feminism is still important?
I was in 8th grade when I started my feminism journey. This was during the 2016 election, which was when I first started hearing about politics. We did like a mock presidential election. And I remember very vividly, I sat next to a boy who was very against all of my morals. And I remember we had an argument about abortion and I went home and cried. My parents saw that I was so distraught that they tried to make me feel better by inviting me to the Women's March with them. So I went to the Women's March in my hometown in Michigan, and I felt so at peace and at home. My dog is very excited about that as well. And I just felt like I was able to speak up, and I felt like I finally had a place where society would listen to me, where I didn't have to cry when that boy told me that I was bad for believing in a woman's right to choose. And so, yeah, I think that I realized that I always wanted to be in a place like I was in that Women's March. I always wanted to elevate women's voices. I always wanted to make sure that we were being heard and that our rights were being listened to.
I think for me personally, it was my junior year of high school. And I feel like that was a little bit late, especially with everything that happened in 2016 and everything, because that had to be around 2018. But I did grow up in a very conservative household. And so a lot of the rhetoric that was being passed around was just very harsh. And because of how harsh it was, it never really aligned with who I was. So I just decided to distance myself from it as much as possible. And it really wasn't until my US history class where one of my teachers talked about how important the role of the Supreme Court is and how important it is for women's reproductive rights. And that completely blew my mind because I didn't understand how they could just take away something as big as Roe v. Wade and strike it down just with one decision. I didn't realize that was even possible. So when I was able to wrap my mind around it, I know I researched Roe v. Wade a lot. I even did a project about it in school just to figure out what the heck it was because I heard so much about it and I had no idea what it was, especially because in my home, that was just something that we didn't talk about. So really being invited into that conversation opened a lot of doors for me. And I realized how much more passion was behind a lot of that. And I think by taking the leap and delving into more and educating myself about all of it, that's really, really given me the power and autonomy to feel like I have a voice. If I didn't have that background knowledge, I don't even know where I'd be today. So I really do thank my educators for letting me in on all of that knowledge that definitely pertains to me.
I think for me, I was introduced to feminism when I was in 6th grade. I really didn't know much about it, didn't do much with it. But in 7th grade, the Parkland shooting occurred in Florida. And I never felt so passionate about a topic at that time. My mom took me to a protest, and just feeling that sense of community, that sense of we need to make a change, really inspired me to get more into feminism, to want to start clubs, to want to be involved instead of just liking social media posts.
For me, I would say I started being aware of misogynoir, which is the hatred and just prejudice against Black women, and which eventually elevated to my understanding of what feminism and the work that can be done in it. And actually, elementary school, just my 3rd grade class, I was just reprimanded and just disciplined so much more than my peers. And it was a predominantly white classroom, because I went to a predominantly white elementary school, and just like beginning to understand how like I was going to have just a much harder experience than my peers just going through this just in this schooling setting. And just like hearing about my family's experience in this district, like with which I think is rooted in misogyny, from my sister being told, even though she tested into a higher math class, that she couldn't do it because they thought she was not mature enough. And just so many instances from like our hair instances with teachers running my hands through their hair, and just a combination of things that made me realize how Black women are going to be treated so much differently in the workplace and schooling. And it made me like want to put in the work to join the fight for equal rights of women, and just like respect. Just the right to be respected by my teachers, by my peers, because I think that's a really important movement in dismantling misogyny in the corporate world and in school. And furthermore, I began to like understand the barriers for women on like political and like more institutionalized stage when the movement for Say Her Name came up, which is bringing attention to Black women who are victims of police brutality, which actually started with a family friend of mine, because my family went to the same church as Sandra Bland, which is the woman who was murdered by a police officer in Texas. And just seeing the forefront of that movement as I was only a middle schooler, and just the movement being created around her for Say Her Name to bring attention to women who are victims of police brutality, because it's just so kept underground, and men are like usually seen as the face of this issue. And so I'd say like that was the most pivotal moment for me to start engaging in the work of Black feminist work, but just feminism in general.
So we have one more comment here. Elizabeth says, I am so inspired by all of you. I feel hopeful for the future because of each of you and your peers. And I would say, I think everyone here tonight, all of the women and the men who are our allies, hope that maybe you will consider elected office. We didn't get a lot of bites on that, but you guys are very inspiring. I want to thank all of you amazing women for joining us tonight. I also want to particularly thank Susan Fuhr, AP European History and American Government, Youth and Government Advisor, Citizens of Metea Advisor, for helping to organize this, and Caitlin Taylor of North Central College, who also helped organize. If you enjoyed this event and appreciate the community and civic work of the League of Women Voters of Naperville, I hope you'll consider joining us. You can go to the join page of our website, lwvnaperville.org. I hope some of you will consider joining us next month, Wednesday, February 8th, at our Ideas Forum, when we will be hearing about climate change and water issues in our own backyard from the League of Women Voters Lake Michigan region expert, Joy Guscott-Mueller. Once again, this has been a very inspiring evening. I want to thank everyone, and I think we'll all be thinking a lot about this tonight.
I'm tearing up, actually. I'm still at school, and I'm so impressed with Zoe, with Madeline. I feel so fortunate that I've had the chance to work with both of them so closely. And again, Libby and Caitlin as well. So thank you so much for giving up your time. I know both of them. Zoe ran from Youth and Government to get there. Madeline had to readjust a musical tryout, a call to kind of be here with us. So thanks again, both of you, for being here.
Yes, and now that I know that even more effort was made, we appreciate it even more. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.